Welcome. I'm Chris Cooke. I've got Peter Stone here together. Peter and I have worked together for decades in the realm of change, transformation, and leadership. And what we're doing in these sessions is we're sharing our experiences, but sharpening some distinctions, putting some current thinking on the table, sharing the thinking that shaped our work, at least here for the last 20 years, working together. Hit or myth, we table an assertion, we use it as a springboard for a discussion, and we see where we end up. So today's assertion is simple: share everything. Where did that come from? Share everything. There's a great TED talk on the subject of distributed leadership, which is a position that we're very aligned to. The TED talk by Gita Fredrickson gives some precepts for what distributed leadership means to her. She says, share everything. Pete, do you say share everything?
Massively, Chris. This is a huge hit for me. You know, we talk about distributed leadership as a mindset and a set of behaviors that you can have in people, and you can connect those people and trying to get those people to operate at cause, so they're influencing and to make the choice to be at cause, to take accountability and to make a difference. So sharing for me, sharing of data, sharing of information, sharing of insights, sharing of emotion, sharing of feeling are hugely powerful to enable people to start to make those kind of choices that we talk about, and giving people the context so that they can be themselves curious and share with each other. And that's what strengthens that kind of organizational network and builds that leadership behavior. So it's a huge hit for me personally. And what's disappointing, though, is the extent to which you still see today bottlenecks in organizations. You see people behaving almost like a computer network, a technology network. You know, imagine if we had a distributed network of technology components, where, you know, one component said, well, I'm not going to share with you, but I'll share with you, or I'll give you two elements, partial pictures. You know, how would that network operate if every component was only working on part of the data, part of the picture?
Dysfunctional.
It would be dysfunctional.
It would be dysfunctional.
Absolutely right. So I see today dysfunctioning organizations because of this absence or lack of sharing.
So we talk about distributed leadership. We believe in distributed leadership. I hear you say that you have to distribute the context and the information for distributed leadership to work. You know, and it's very rare. And I'll just give you an example of a bottleneck. You and I worked together in the insurance industry many years ago. We're cascading down, I think it was a set of values for the organization. And the idea was every functional leader down the hierarchy would share. So we give everyone the same deck, we give everyone the same training. This is how you share the values of the firm. Half the company got it, half the company didn't get it. And you look at where it was the information shadow, because the people at the top didn't think they were very good at communicating, so they didn't communicate. And then you've got half your company has the values, half doesn't, not very functional. And for some people, it's about an orientation for power. I think it was 16th century Francis Bacon said information is power, and he goes on to say that hoarding power is a great vice. It's a form, hoarding information. It's a great vice, form of tyranny. So fast forward from 16th century to, where are we? Is it the 21st century? The 22nd century? Anyway, 2024. 2023, as an organization called DORA, DevOps Research and Assessment, and they started to empirically evidence the power of information flow. So they have a lot to say about culture. They have a lot to say about software engineering and how you set it up for success. In chapter 7 of the report, they say, this is very interesting, say, without investing in culture, none of the above matters. And their cultural model is adopted from a guy called Professor Ron Westrom, Theory of Culture. Cultural typology really focuses on information flow. I've been taking a bit of a deep dive into this subject, to be honest.
Okay, well, I'm going to test you on that in a minute, just to see how deep your dive has gone.
Really? Okay.
Can I just make one link back to our previous video, which is on the subject of listening? Yes. So listening in the context of sharing is a critical component. You know, you just touched on this notion of cascade. So, what leaders often do is they rely on Cascade as the mechanism for sharing, and they miss the listening component. And communication is what's heard, not what's told. So, listening is a critical part of this story, to check back what was heard, and to listen for, as we previously said, listen for context, listen for understanding, listen for commitment, and that allows you collectively to start creating mutual influence. So you get this kind of working in the grain, I think we said.
Sharing everything is not transmit only, then it's transmit and receive. And we're starting to think about a network, networks of influence, and distributed expert leadership in networks. As you say, influence for the many, not power for the few. So it has to be bi-directional. It's probably a technical term for that, but I forget what it is.
It probably is, and it's continuous. It's not a simple two-way transaction. It's a continuous transmit, receive, continuous. Now, you mentioned you've been doing a deep dive on Ron Westrum.
Because I love research and topics.
So we'll have a little bit of a throwback game now. We're going to play a game of Mastermind. And so I have prepared some questions for you to test your understanding. And you've got 90 seconds. You may pass on a question. You've got 90 seconds to answer.
Before you start, Pete, Mastermind was modeled on Gestapo questioning techniques. So in the game, they shine a bright light in somebody's eyes. They fire questions at them and their brain just gets scrambled, which is probably what you're going to do to me, right?
This is what I'm going to try and do to you right now.
All right, let's see.
So you've got 90 seconds. You may pass.
I may well pass or fail.
And your time starts now.
Okay.
In Ron Westrum's research are the two key organizational capabilities he identifies as driven by culture.
Okay, he defines culture as how an organization responds to problems and how it responds to opportunity.
Correct. In Ron Westrum's typology of organizational behaviors, what does he identify as the key variable and type marker of organizational culture?
I've been talking about it. Information flow.
Correct, correct. What are the three types of culture that he defines?
So he talks about pathological, bureaucratic, and then jargon word, generative.
Correct. Yep. What leadership preoccupation does he claim creates these three different cultures?
Okay, so it varies. Pathological is about power and self. Bureaucratic is about your team, your silo. It's actually about rules, a focus on rules. And the generative is more generous. It's a focus on the performance outcomes.
Correct. What percentage of high-performing organizations does he claim exhibit generative culture?
Okay, Westrum's original white paper says 80% of the highest performing organizations in his sample were generative.
Correct. Yep. What are the 7 key attributes of generative culture in this model?
Cooperation, risk sharing, risk sharing, messengers are trained, novelty is implemented. I've timed out.
Correct. So, Chris, you scored 6 out of 6.
6 out of 6.
You missed out on 4 questions.
Ask me the other questions. Sir.
What are the 3 conditions he sees as resulting from information flow?
I know this, that's autonomy, empowerment, alignment.
How does Dora define team performance?
It's quite complicated, but it's adaptability to change, relying on each other are key components. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, what organization is the role model adopter for some of these
That's
precepts?
worth stating. Dora are owned by Google, and all the quantitative research comes from Google. Actually, this is why it's important, because we can talk about the jargon and we can make it a trivia quiz, but working with my clients right now, I know they're technology clients, so they're into DevOps and so on. There are 2 things that they want to talk to us about as consultants. One of them is generative AI, large language models, and what is more properly known as machine learning than artificial intelligence. And that's one thing. But the thing where we really play is generative, not AI, but generative culture, because they all read these DevOps research and assessment reports. They're published annually. A lot of them have implemented some of the technical capabilities and performance measures. And then this organization says, without investing in culture, nothing else matters. And they're suddenly thinking, I've spoken for 90 seconds ago. So it's now, so we've been saying this for 20 years. We've been doing this work. We've been developing these these conditions in our clients, but now somebody tells you you're going to get a 30% productivity gain. A high performing team in the DORA research with the Western culture, with that culture, they have evidence that those teams outperform other teams by 30%. Now, if you've got 10,000 people in your organization, 30% is big bananas. So they subscribe to DORA, and we may have been saying this for a while, but now it has this stamp and it has this. But I think the empirical evidence is really compelling. So yeah, that's why it's on the table.
So where we talk about distributed leadership, and the new language is about creating a generative culture, what that's talking about is shifting away from some older models where perhaps power, identity, ego dominates the leader, and that drives the culture, the mindset, the behavior of the person or the individual at the top of the hierarchy. Moving away from that model, also moving away from the model where the outcome is the efficient function of the system.
Rule-based.
So rule-based. So functions operate with each other. Standards, parameters, policies, procedures, processes, frameworks, models. So the function of the system. So what we're then talking about in this new distributed leadership model, or generative culture, as the language says, is the notion of behavior and performance, where there's some alignment, there's commonality. People align cross-organization, cross-silo. They align within teams. Teams can align. And that's where the connectivity comes from. And if we can achieve that, then we can really unlock the performance of the organization much further than the function of the system or the ability of these single individuals at the top of the hierarchy.
And what DORA are giving us now, because we've known some of this for some time, but what DORA are now giving us is some empirical data to drive this. And if Google says it's true, then to a certain extent it must be. And it's an interesting field. A lot of our clients, are trying to manage a culture you are part of is almost impossible. So it's a role that we play as consultants here. So there's a body of theory. And you said you subscribe to the body of theory. Now you put me on the spot with my geekery. I'm going to put you on the spot with your leadership, because there's theory and there's practice. And I'm just going to ask you to kind of tell us as a leader how you dealt with, we talk about response to problems, response to opportunity. Sometimes the problem, the Chinese would say, a problem is an opportunity. So two scenarios, and you tell me the story. I might tell you if it was generative or not. Okay. So first scenario is you're merging two teams. So you have the existing practice, you have another practice coming to join us from outside. You've built probably a generative culture within one of those practices. The one coming in from outside either had a pathological or a bureaucratic culture, but we know it was underperforming and we know that information wasn't shared. So tell me in a minute how you dealt with that, and then take a breath, and then tell me about another crisis that we had. It's when we were all locked down. And our business model was face-to-face training. In a world of travel bans, we had a great explanation as to why we were going to underperform that year. So what did we actually do? So I know you lived through these wars.
Yeah.
You tell me what you did. I'll tell you what I think of it.
Okay. Well, let's take the second one first, the COVID scenario. Yeah. So obviously the business unit that we have delivers face-to-face, or delivered face-to-face, and it was international. Yep. So in the face of no international travel and no interaction with another human being face-to-face, that looked potentially catastrophic for our business. And, as you alluded, there's a great opportunity for an explanation there to say, well, we can't deliver. We can't hit that revenue. We can't hit that P&L. Our clients will all walk away because. And
we know we had some competitors that happened to.
And we know that really happened out there. But if we talk, back to what we say about leadership, leadership is about making the choice to put yourself at cause, not at effect. Yes. Don't be the one that comes up with a great explanation. Yeah. Results does not equal no results plus a great explanation. Take accountability and make a difference. So what actually happened was I declared a breakdown. I declared a breakdown with everybody in the team. I can remember the conversation like it was yesterday. This is the commitment that we have in the background. to the organization, to ourselves, and to our clients. So there's a kind of multi-level sets of commitments. So there's a restate of the commitment, and there was a statement of fact. This is the situation that we are in.
Because we had contracts being closed.
Because we had contracts, and we did have specific commitments to clients, and we had clients who were openly saying we don't want to carry on. And what I also did was we declared the breakdown, which says this is really an interruption to our commitment. So it's an interruption. That's a key thing. So an interruption says there's a way on. There's something on the other side of this. We've not hit kind of a block or a cliff. It's an interruption to a commitment. And the second thing was to share some vulnerability, which I think is really important to be on the context of sharing and information flow, is to say to the team, I'm actually quite scared. Yeah. I've never been in this situation before in my 30 or so years of working. I feel scared. I feel scared for you as individuals in the practice. I feel scared for our clients. I feel scared for our futures. And I don't know. I just don't know. So that openness and that honesty and that vulnerability, I now know landed really well with people. Yeah. And then it was changing the conversation into, kind of what about you? How vulnerable do you feel? And that was really a relatedness. I think you mentioned relatedness in our previous video. So we have a conversation for relatedness. So what we found from that was actually we're all quite aligned. We're equally scared, we're equally vulnerable, and we're also all committed. So then we can shift to, well, what could we do? I might be accountable for the overall performance, but I don't have the answers. Who has any answers? Who has any ideas? So very open conversation about possibility, about opportunity. What could we do? How could we do it? And we made some bets. We just tried some things. And interestingly, somebody somewhere made a decision that any kind of rework we do, we charge the client. And I unpicked that and said, no, we're not. And I had a conversation with the clients, a very open conversation, said, this is the situation that we're in. And I know that you're in a very difficult situation too. Tell me about your situation. And then what we said was, well, look, we both have the same commitment to achieve this for the people who are on the programs. Why don't we just redesign it and not even think about the cost? We just do it. So let's be driven by our commitment to the client. Let's be driven by our commitment to the individuals within the client who would benefit from the program. So we just tried some things, and we were driven by a collective commitment. And guess what? We didn't miss a single beat on our budget that year. Yeah. We hit the budget.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to give you the generative pass on that. So kind of interesting, that information sharing with the group, actually the information sharing and the listening with the clients as well. So genuine transparency, and it's a real partnership. We talk about the outcomes of that being awareness of the situation, alignment of the commitment, and then empowering people to go and do something about it. And the consequence being that novelty it's hard for us to remember now that delivering virtual and digital training was novelty very long ago, and novelty being implemented and the adaptability to change are kind of hallmarks of the generative culture. So I think we're going to give ourselves, I'll give you some points on that. Right. But what about the other? What about the other?
The second one was very different situation. So two business units, one highly performant, kind of behaviorally and results wise, great momentum, growing, clear strategy, and other unit had great self-belief. It had some degree of strategy. It was organized very differently. And when I took it over, it had no revenue, no pipeline, zero. So it was a financial disaster zone. Whereas the other one was kind of growing and delivering great returns. So two very, very different financial situations, bringing together 40 or 50 or so people. And it was, crikey, how are we going to do this? So the approach there, similar in terms of transparency, but the transparency was one of fact. You give people the facts.
Facts, not story.
Facts, not stories.
Yeah.
So, the facts were, this is the revenue outlook. This is the size and shape of the pipeline. There's a consequence to that situation, which is another set of facts. Where does that lead you if it carries on? Now, I also had to check my own listening, because I was listening with there's a story behind this. How can it get to this situation?
Yeah.
But that doesn't help the team.
Blaming
people. If I start overlaying my story onto this situation, that's really unhelpful. So there was a kind of hold back my story and just give the facts. Yeah. But also kind of listen within the team to see what capabilities existed. So kind of giving them an opportunity to share. Now, what came out of that was, yes, the financial situation had to be dealt with. It couldn't be tolerated. It couldn't carry on. The facts spoke for themselves. But actually, there was a lot of deep and underlying capability that if I talk to the broader team and we get back to what could we be like if we had these combined sets of capabilities. So kind of there's a bit of adaptability in there. Let's not just fold this into the pre-existing strategy, but what could the strategy be if we had a new set of capabilities that some of these folks had, out of which we created a new operating model. We did adapt our strategy. We did change our strategy. Now, sadly, we had to make some decisions. So we did make some decisions. We made them early. We communicated hard as to what was happening, why it was happening, again, based on facts, not on interpretation. And we allowed people the time and space to explore that, to be curious with me and some of the other folks as to what does that mean? How could this be? Help me understand a little bit more. I'm quite scared by this. I'm worried about I've lost colleagues. So we're very conscious of listening for breakdowns in some social constructs and team constructs. So being sensitive that two colleagues, or suddenly one colleague stays and one goes. So there's a lot of listening back for the impact of breakdown on relationships and teams and constructs, and listening for how historically the teams had got work done, because it was very different. But we kept coming back to our commitment is to achieve a strategy. Our commitment is to achieve a set of numbers, and our commitment is to do that with a new combined set of capabilities. So that's really kind of what we went through, and we're 6 months into that at the moment.
Yeah. See, well, I'm hearing a couple of things there. One is treat people as adults. If you can handle the truth, so can they. And I see a lot of more paternalistic organizations that kind of shield people from the reality. You know, if there is a cliff edge there, there is a cliff edge there, and it's gonna, you know, we are all in the same boat. So I think treating people as adults and trusting them with the information, so that information flow, as they talk about it being two directional. And also, just a question on my mind that comes out of this is where people are kind of used to working in one culture, where they weren't given the information, where they're protected from the reality. Maybe it's very rules driven, very silo, very functional organized, and then kind of bringing them into a culture which is then completely different. How do those people respond?
Yes, a good question. It's interesting that I've seen a kind of cycle of behavior. They've gone through a curve. There was originally a lot of anger. Why didn't we know this? Why did nobody tell us this? Why are we only just finding out now? And then there's kind of a resentment. I don't want to know this. I didn't want to know this. You shouldn't have told me. This is your role. You should be keeping this. Let me just do my job. I don't need to know the situation, as it were. So there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of resentment. But in classic change theory, what you then started to see was some exploration, and people started to engage. So people now ask about the numbers. They ask about the pipeline, and because it's been shared, and because they've got the context, they get curious with it, and they start to explore how can they make the difference. So I've really seen 4 or 5 individuals absolutely thriving because now they've got the context. Now they understand the bigger picture. Now they've been connected to some of the new colleagues with complementary capabilities. They're starting to make a difference, and they're presenting all sorts of opportunities and ideas. So we've gone through the anger, resentment, some exploration, and now into kind of really identifying and realizing opportunity.
It's interesting because the Google and Dora work suggests 30% performance uplift benefit. Do you think you've achieved the 30% uplift in performance in the organization as you take it through a different culture?
What I would say is it hasn't yet come through on the numbers, but I'm a great believer in look at what creates performance and really listen for those kind of levers being pulled? Are you seeing evidence of people thinking and behaving in different ways? And if you get the evidence of thinking and behaving in different ways, so I want people to connect, I want people to explore, I want people to bring complementary skill sets, to be outward focused and to be at cause. And I'm seeing all of that. Now, interestingly, our pipeline in terms of the opportunities that we have at decision or at proposal or at prospect stage is bigger than it's ever been.
Okay.
Never seen it as big as that. The range and the variety of work is broader than it's ever been. The breadth of client coverage is greater than it's ever been. It hasn't yet followed through into kind of contracts just yet. But in terms of, if I was thinking about predictive indicators, then I feel very strong about it and feel very good about it.
Yeah, maybe I was thinking with the kind of test of whether this cultural transformation is fully effective is novelty being implemented, one of the attributes of generative culture. I think it's easy for like an acquiring culture just to carry on doing what it used to do now with more resources and scale up what it used to do. And that's not the whole argument. The whole argument here is through distributed leadership and collaboration and creating equality of information and context, then novelty gets implemented. So maybe that's something we just need to kind of, where is the real innovation here? Where are the new service lines? Where are the new ways of delivering value to clients? So maybe that's what's still to come, and then the numbers.
And it's not an overnight. It's not an overnight. No. It's not an immediate. It's not a quick fix.
But the thing is, we're not snuffing it out, I guess.
No.
So, so generative culture. So we talked about DevOps and Dora and Google, but I think one of the things, share everything. I think we're saying here, actually, in any organization which uses experts as leaders, which is knowledge-based, which is knowledge working, we're probably going to find the 80% of high-performing organizations have a generative culture. What do you think, Pete? I think it's a hit.
I think it's a massive hit, like I said at the top of the video. And I'd go broader. I think any organization that is relying on the performance of people has an opportunity to create distributed leadership. And it's great to see that now has a badge, as it were, generative culture. Any organization has the opportunity to create that and really unlock the performance of people. So that is huge here.
The work I'm really keen to get started on here with some clients is benchmarking. Kind of benchmarking to what extent, because a lot of leaders think they share information, think they have a generative culture, but this thing about actually getting the data, getting the facts, letting the facts speak for themselves. So I think Dora is a lot about metrics, and I think novelty being implemented, I think the next wave of change around this is more benchmarking, a more rigorous assessment of culture. So that's something to look forward to in our work. So I think that wraps this up. We're saying a hit.
Huge hit.
Share everything. Do you agree? Let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.